My name is Alina Rodriguez, and I learned the hard way that blood isn't always thicker than water. Sometimes, it's just a conduit for betrayal. Imagine spending 4 years of your life, countless sleepless nights, and every ounce of your sanity on a single breakthrough, only to have the person you grew up with hand it over to strangers just to secure a ring on her finger. My sister didn't just steal my files, she tried to steal my future. But she forgot one thing: I'm the one who wrote the data, and I'm the only one who knows where the landmines are buried. I've always been the invisible sister. In our house, my sister Chloe was the sun, and my parents were the planets orbiting her, desperate for a little warmth. I was just the girl in the basement office, buried under medical journals and data sets. I'm a PhD candidate specializing in molecular biology. My thesis wasn't just a paper, it was a potential patent-level breakthrough in synthetic protein structures. It was my ticket out of my family's shadow. Chloe, on the other hand, is a master of aesthetic living. She's a marketing consultant who specializes in selling a version of herself that doesn't actually exist. 6 months ago, she started dating Julian. Julian comes from the kind of wealth that feels heavy: old money, Ivy League legacies, and a family tree full of renowned surgeons and researchers. His father, Dr. Sterling, is a titan in the biotech industry. From the second Chloe met them, she was terrified. She was terrified that they'd see her for what she was, someone who didn't know the difference between a peptide and a probiotic. She felt intellectually inferior, her words, not mine. So she did what Chloe always does: she looked for a shortcut. It started small. She'd come into my office with a glass of wine, acting unusually sisterly. "Tell me about your work, Elle," she'd say, leaning over my shoulder. "I want to be able to talk shop with Julian's dad. I don't want to look like a bimbo at dinner." Against my better judgment, I explained it to her. I broke down complex biological pathways into layman's terms. I thought we were bonding. I thought, for the first time in 25 years, my sister actually respected what I did. I even showed her my master file, the Holy Grail as I called it, where all my final conclusions and the proprietary algorithm were stored. "It's encrypted, right?" she asked, her eyes fixed on the screen. "Of course," I replied, tapping the external drive. "And backed up to a cloud server that requires two-factor authentication. I'm not stupid, Chloe." I should have known then. The interest wasn't in the science, it was in the security. Last Tuesday, the atmosphere in the house shifted. Julian's parents had invited us all to a formal dinner at their estate. It was supposed to be the big night where the families merged. Chloe was vibrating with a weird mix of anxiety and triumph. My parents were dressing like they were meeting royalty. I was exhausted. I'd been at the lab for 18 hours straight, and all I wanted was to grab my external drive, do one last check on my data, and maybe sleep for an hour before the dinner. I went to my desk. The spot where my black leather-bound drive usually sat was empty. I didn't panic at first. I checked my bag, I checked the kitchen counter, I checked the pockets of my lab coat. Nothing. Then I sat at my computer. I tried to log into my cloud backup. Access denied. Password changed 4 hours ago. My blood went cold. My heart started hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it would bruise. I tried the recovery email. Recovery code sent to c@gmail.com. Chloe's email. I didn't scream, I didn't even cry. I just stood there in the silence of my room, the reality of it sinking in like lead. My sister hadn't just borrowed a dress or a pair of shoes this time. She had reached inside my brain and ripped out 4 years of my life. I walked into her room. She wasn't there, she was already downstairs, getting into the car with my parents. But her iPad was sitting on her vanity, unlocked. I swiped through her open tabs. There it was, an email draft to Dr. Sterling. The subject line: preliminary findings on synthetic protein folding, Chloe Vance. She had rebranded my entire dissertation as her independent research project. She told him she'd been working on it in secret, afraid to share it until it was perfect. She'd even written a script for herself on how to explain the inspiration behind it. I heard the car honk outside. My father's voice boomed up the stairs. "Alina, let's go. We can't be late for the Sterlings." I looked at the iPad, then at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes looked different. The girl who used to take the back seat, the girl who let Chloe have the bigger room and the better birthday parties, she was gone. I grabbed my phone and synced my own secondary hidden backup, the one I'd kept on a thumb drive hidden inside a hollowed-out book. Chloe was smart, but she wasn't a scientist. She didn't realize that in my field we always have a fail-safe. I walked downstairs, adjusted my coat, and plastered a smile on my face. "Ready," I said, catching Chloe's eye in the hallway. She looked at me, and for a split second I saw a flash of guilt. But it was quickly replaced by that familiar, smug sparkle of hers. She thought she'd won. She thought I was just the bitter sister who would sit at the dinner table in silence while she took my crown. She had no idea that I was about to let her walk right onto the stage she built, only I'd replace the floorboards with thin air. The drive to the Sterling estate was suffocating. My parents were in the front, radiating a level of pride I hadn't seen since Chloe won homecoming queen. My father kept adjusting his tie in the rearview mirror, talking about how this alliance with the Sterlings would put our family on a different social map. Chloe sat next to me, scrolling through her phone, likely memorizing the bullet points she'd stolen from my brain. "You okay, Elle? You're awfully quiet," my mother said, looking back at me. "Try to be a bit more upbeat tonight. This is a big deal for your sister. We don't want your academic intensity to dampen the mood." Academic intensity. That's what they called my life's work when it was a social inconvenience. But now that Chloe was pretending it was hers, now it was a brilliant hidden talent. "I'm fine, Mom," I said, my voice as flat as a dial tone. Just thinking about how much work went into that research, it's truly life-changing. Chloe's thumb froze on her screen. She didn't look at me, but I saw her jaw tighten. She knew I knew, but she also knew our parents. If I made a scene now, I'd be the jealous, unstable sister trying to ruin Chloe's happiness. They had spent years conditioning me to keep the peace while Chloe broke the toys. When we pulled up to the Sterling mansion, it felt like entering a fortress of old-world academia and new-world greed. Marble pillars, manicured lawns, and a silence that felt expensive. Julian met us at the door, looking every bit the golden boy. He kissed Chloe on the cheek and shook my father's hand with a firm, practiced grip. "Dr. Sterling is in the library," Julian whispered to Chloe, his eyes beaming. "He's already read the summary you sent. Elena, good to see you too." He gave me a polite, dismissive nod, the kind you give to the smart but boring sister. We were led into a dining room that felt more like a boardroom. Dr. Sterling sat at the head of the table, flanked by his wife, a woman whose pearls looked like they cost more than my tuition. The atmosphere was thick with expectation. "Chloe," Dr. Sterling began, his voice deep and authoritative. "I must say I was floored by the data you sent over this afternoon. Synthetic protein folding, it's a bold field for someone with your background in marketing. Where on earth did you find the time?" My mother chimed in before Chloe could even breathe. "Our Chloe has always been a dark horse. She's always had a scientific mind, haven't you, sweetie? She just didn't want to brag while Elena was struggling with her little labs." My little labs. I felt a phantom heat rising in my chest. I looked at Chloe. She looked back, her eyes pleading for a second before they turned cold. She was choosing her path. "Well," Chloe said, her voice trembling slightly but gaining strength, "I've always felt that marketing was just a way to understand human behavior, but my real passion, my real work, was in the laboratory of the mind. I wanted to prove that I could contribute something significant to Julian's world." Julian looked at her like she was a goddess. Dr. Sterling, however, leaned forward. He was a shark. He didn't just want the what, he wanted the how. "The algorithm you used to predict the folding patterns, the Vance protocol as you named it in your email, it's revolutionary. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the stability of the hydrogen bonds in the third phase." Chloe blinked. "This wasn't in the summary, this was the deep end." She looked at me for a split second, a silent SOS. I took a slow sip of my water, watching her over the rim of the glass. I could have helped her. I could have whispered a hint. But instead, I just smiled, a small, sharp smile. "Go on, Chloe," I encouraged, my voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Tell them about the hydrogen bonds. You were so passionate about them this morning." Chloe cleared her throat. Right, the bonds. Well, I found that in the third phase. The stability is, paramount. It's all about maintaining the integrity of the structure. It was a word salad, a meaningless, empty sequence of syllables. Dr. Sterling narrowed his eyes. He wasn't stupid. He could smell the desperation. The integrity, Dr. Sterling repeated. Specifically, how did you account for the thermal fluctuations in the simulation? That's the bottleneck in current research. Chloe's hand was shaking so much she had to put her fork down. My father, sensing the tension but not understanding the science, laughed nervously. Oh, you know how these geniuses are, Dr. Sterling. They don't like to give away their secrets too easily. It's not a secret if you're looking for a partnership, Chloe, Dr. Sterling said, his tone shifting from curious to skeptical. I've invited a colleague of mine to join us for dessert. Dr. Aris, the head of the department at the university. I told him he had to meet the woman who solved the Vance protocol. Chloe's face went from pale to ghostly white. Dr. Aris, my mentor, the man who had been supervising my research for the last 3 years, the man who knew my writing style, my data, and my voice better than my own parents did. I felt a rush of adrenaline. This was it. The stage was set and Chloe was standing right over the trapdoor. She had stolen my files, but she hadn't realized that the version she took, the one I'd left accidentally open on my screen when I saw her lurking, was the one I'd sabotaged. I had shifted the decimal points in the final calculations. On paper, it looked brilliant. In practice, or under the scrutiny of an expert like Dr. Aris, it was a mathematical dead end. I think I might be getting a migraine, Chloe stammered, standing up. Nonsense, dear, my mother said, pulling her back down. You're just nervous. Stay, Dr. Aris will be here any minute. I leaned in closer to Chloe, whispering just loud enough for her to hear. Don't worry, sis, just tell them exactly how you developed that algorithm. I'm sure Dr. Aris would love to hear how my sister managed to do in a weekend what I've been trying to do for years. Chloe looked at me, and for the first time, she saw the predator behind my eyes. She realized that I wasn't the victim tonight. I was the architect. The moment Dr. Aris's name left Dr. Sterling's lips, the air in the room didn't just cool, it turned sub-zero. My parents were beaming, practically vibrating with the kind of vicarious pride they usually reserved for Chloe's social media milestones. They truly believed their golden child was about to be anointed as the next scientific prodigy. But Chloe, she looked like she had just been handed a death sentence. She knew Dr. Aris. More importantly, Dr. Aris knew me. He had been my mentor for 3 years. He knew the rhythm of my prose, the logic of my data, and the specific way I structured my biological models. Chloe's eyes darted to mine, a silent, frantic SOS. For a second, I felt that old, familiar tug of sisterly guilt. I had spent my whole life being her safety net. When she failed a class, I tutored her. When she broke a heart, I held the tissue box. But as I looked at her sitting there in her designer dress, prepared to build a career on the wreckage of my hard work, that guilt withered and died. Elena, you know Dr. Aris, don't you? Julian asked, his voice bright and unsuspecting. Oh, we're very well acquainted, I said, taking a slow, deliberate sip of my wine. He's the head of my department. I wouldn't be where I am without his guidance. Dr. Sterling tilted his head, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. Interesting, so you both share a passion for molecular biology? Chloe mentioned she mostly worked in isolation to keep her vision pure. Isolation is one word for it, I replied, my smile sharp enough to draw blood. The doors opened and Dr. Aris walked in. He looked exactly as he always did, sharp suit, spectacles tucked into his breast pocket, and a gaze that could dismantle a flawed hypothesis in seconds. He held a tablet in his hand, and I could see the glow of a familiar spreadsheet on the screen. Good evening, everyone, Aris said. His eyes found me immediately. He paused, a momentary look of profound confusion crossing his face, but he was a professional. He turned to Dr. Sterling. Arthur, you sent me that paper this afternoon. I have to say I haven't stopped looking at it since. My mother clapped her hands together. Isn't it wonderful? Our Chloe has been working so hard on it. Dr. Eris turned his gaze to Chloe. It wasn't a warm look. It was the look a biologist gives a particularly puzzling specimen. Miss Vance, you authored this. The Vance Protocol for Protein Stabilization? Chloe's voice was a thin reed. Yes, it's been a passion project of mine for a long time. Eris looked back at his tablet. That's fascinating. Because I ran the simulations based on your final calculations, the ones provided in the appendix, and I ran into a bit of a problem. The table went silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. The math is gorgeous, Chloe, Eris continued, his voice dropping into a dangerous academic low. On paper, it looks like a Nobel-level breakthrough, but when you actually apply the thermal dynamics, it violates the second law of thermodynamics. It's physically impossible. In fact, it looks like someone took a perfectly valid set of data and then intentionally sabotaged the final variables to create a result that looks revolutionary but is actually a mathematical dead end. Chloe's face went from pale to a sickly, translucent gray. I might have made a typo. It was a long night. A typo? Eris scoffed. You don't typo an entire algorithmic shift, unless, of course, you didn't understand the math you were writing. He looked at Dr. Sterling. Arthur, I don't know what's going on here, but I've seen this work before. I've seen it every week for the last 2 years in my lab, only it didn't belong to Chloe. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush the fine china. My father cleared his throat, his face reddening. Now hold on a minute, Dr. Eris. Are you suggesting our daughter is a liar? Chloe is a brilliant girl. She's a brilliant marketer, Mr. Vance. I interrupted, my voice calm, cutting through my father's bluster. But she isn't a scientist. She couldn't tell you the difference between a covalent bond and a stock bond. Elena, shut up, my mother hissed. How can you be so cruel to your sister at a time like this? Cruel? I stood up, the chair scraping against the hardwood floor like a gunshot. What's cruel is breaking into my encrypted files. What's cruel is changing the passwords to my cloud storage so I couldn't access my own life's work. What's cruel is standing here in front of your future in-laws and trying to sell my soul as your own. I looked at Chloe, who was now trembling so hard her silverware was rattling. I knew you were looking at my screen, Chloe. I saw you watching me from the doorway 3 nights ago, so I left a gift for you. I left a dummy file open. It had all my real research up to the 90% mark, but the final 10%. The part that makes it work, I replaced it with junk, beautiful-looking, complex, utter nonsense. I turned to Dr. Sterling and Julian. The reason it doesn't work is because I designed it to fail. I knew she'd take it. I just didn't think she'd be arrogant enough to send it to an expert without checking it first. Julian looked at Chloe as if he were seeing a stranger. Chloe, is this true? Did you steal this from Elena? Chloe didn't answer. She couldn't. She just sat there, a hollow shell of the golden child she used to be. The anatomy of her revenge had been deconstructed, and all that was left was the bone-deep ugliness of her betrayal. The dining room, which only moments ago was filled with the sounds of high society chatter and clinking crystal, was now as silent as a grave. Dr. Sterling looked at Chloe with an expression that transitioned from professional skepticism to pure, unadulterated disgust. For a man whose entire family legacy was built on the sanctity of research and intellectual integrity, what Chloe had done wasn't just a lie, it was a profanity. Julian, Dr. Sterling said, his voice dangerously quiet. I think you should step into the library with your mother. No, Julian said, his voice cracking. He was staring at Chloe, his eyes searching her face for any sign that I was lying. I want to hear her say it, Chloe. Did you really think you could just take Elena's life and wear it like a costume? Chloe finally looked up. Her eyes were red, but the tears weren't of sorrow, they were of rage. She looked at me, her face contorting. You did this. You set me up, you knew I was desperate to impress them. You've always been the smart one, the special one. I just wanted one night where I was the one they looked at. They were looking at you, Chloe, I said, leaning over the table. But they were looking at a ghost. You didn't just want their attention, you wanted my credit. You wanted the patent. You wanted the prestige without the 3 a.m. lab shifts and the failed experiments. You're not a victim of my setup. You're a victim of your own entitlement. My mother finally found her voice, though it was weak. Elena, surely we can fix this. It's just a misunderstanding. Chloe was probably just trying to help you share your work. Stop it, Mom, I snapped. The sharpness of my voice made her flinch. Stop protecting the person who just committed academic fraud and identity theft. If I hadn't sabotaged that file, she would be signing a contract with Dr. Sterling right now for work she doesn't even understand. That's a crime. That's not helping. Dr. Aris stepped forward, placing his tablet on the table between us. The integrity of this university and my lab is at stake here. Miss Vance, the files you borrowed contain proprietary algorithms funded by federal grants. This isn't just a family squabble. This is a legal nightmare. At the word legal, my father's face went from red to a ghostly gray. He was a man who cared about his pension and his reputation in the neighborhood. Legal? Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves, Doctor. It's a family matter. It stopped being a family matter the moment it was sent to my inbox. Dr. Sterling intervened. He turned to me, his gaze softening but remaining professional. Elena, Dr. Aris speaks very highly of you. He mentioned a real breakthrough. If the version Chloe sent was the junk file, where is the actual research? This was the moment. The pivot, the transition from the girl who was robbed to the woman who owned the room. I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out the small, silver thumb drive, the one I had retrieved from the hollowed-out book in my room. I walked over to Dr. Aris and handed it to him. This is the uncorrupted data, I said. It includes the corrected thermodynamic variables and the actual protein folding sequences. If you check the metadata, you'll see the creation dates go back 3 years. You'll also see the logs of every time I accessed it from the university library. Dr. Aris plugged the drive into his tablet. The room waited in a state of suspended animation. He scrolled through the files, his eyes widening slightly as he hit the final summary. He looked up at Dr. Sterling and gave a single, slow nod. This is it, Aris whispered. This is the work we've been waiting for, Arthur. It's flawless. Dr. Sterling looked at the screen, then back at me. And you did this while your sister was, what, marketing herself? I did this while my sister was being the golden child and my parents were telling me to stay out of her way so I wouldn't ruin her vibe, I said, looking directly at my mother. Julian stood up slowly. He looked at Chloe, then took the engagement ring box out of his pocket, the one he had planned to officially present to her during the toast. He didn't say a word. He just placed it on the table and walked out of the room. Chloe let out a jagged, horrifying sob. Julian, wait! She tried to follow him, but she tripped on the hem of her expensive dress, falling onto the Persian rug. My parents rushed to her side, but for the first time, they didn't look like protectors. They looked like people who had realized they had invested everything in a stock that just hit zero. I think it's time for you all to leave, Dr. Sterling said, his voice cold and final. Except for Elena, we have a lot to discuss regarding the future of this research and how to protect it from any further. Domestic interference? I watched my parents help a hysterical Chloe to her feet. They looked at me, waiting for me to say something, to offer a way out, to tell Dr. Sterling it was all a joke. I didn't say a word. I just sat back down in my chair, picked up my fork, and waited for them to be escorted out of the house. I had spent my life in the basement. It was time for them to see what it felt like to be left in the dark. The aftermath was not an explosion. It was a slow, agonizing burn. As the front doors of the Sterling estate clicked shut behind my family, the silence in the dining room felt like a coronation. Dr. Sterling and Dr. Aris didn't offer empty platitudes. They were men of logic. We spent the next 2 hours discussing patents, legal protections, and a fast-track fellowship that would move me out of my parents' house and into a high-security university apartment by the end of the week. When I finally took an Uber back to the house, I expected a war. I expected my father to be pacing and my mother to be sharpening her tongue. Instead, I found a wreckage. Chloe was on the sofa, her mascara running in black rivers down her face. The designer dress she'd been so proud of was crumpled and stained. My mother was hovering over her with tea she wouldn't drink, and my father was staring at a glass of whiskey like it held the secrets to his failed parenting. "You're home," my father said, his voice hollow. "I hope you're happy, Alina. You destroyed your sister's life tonight." Julian called. "It's over. The Sterlings are threatening a defamation lawsuit if we ever contact them again." I didn't even take off my coat. I stood in the doorway, feeling the cold night air still clinging to me. "I didn't destroy her life, Dad. I just stopped being the person who hides the fact that she's destroying it herself. She stole from me." "Why is that the part you keep skipping over?" "It was just a mistake," Chloe shrieked, sitting up. Her voice was raw. "I was going to give you credit later, I just needed to get through the dinner. You've always been so selfish with your precious science." I looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time, I didn't see the golden child who took everything I had. I saw a deeply insecure, middle-aged woman in the making, someone who would spend her whole life trying to fake the depth she refused to work for. "You were never going to give me credit, Chloe," I said calmly. "You had already drafted the Vance Protocol announcement. My name wasn't on it. You didn't just want the win, you wanted to erase the fact that I exist." My mother stepped toward me, her eyes wet. "Alina, please, we're a family. We have to fix this. Maybe you can tell Dr. Sterling you made a mistake. Tell him you gave Chloe the wrong files by accident. We can still save her reputation." I almost laughed. The anatomy of revenge isn't just about the strike. It's about the realization that the people you loved are willing to sacrifice you to save a lie. "No," I said. "In fact, I'm moving out on Monday. Dr. Aris has arranged a university-funded residence for me. And since the Sterling Foundation is now the primary sponsor of my patent, their legal team will be handling any internal threats to the intellectual property. That includes you." The room went cold. My father put down his glass. "Are you threatening your own parents with lawyers?" "I'm protecting my future," I replied. "Something you forgot to do 20 years ago when you started letting Chloe treat me like her personal ghostwriter. You didn't raise 2 daughters, you raised a queen and a servant. Well, the servant just quit." I walked upstairs and started packing. I didn't take much, just my books, my laptop, and the silver drive that held my future. The next few months were a whirlwind of reality. Without the Sterling connection, Chloe's marketing business took a nosedive. Reputation is currency in those circles, and word of the stolen dissertation spread like a virus. She lost her high-end clients. She lost her social standing. Eventually, she had to take an entry-level job at a firm 3 towns over just to pay off the credit card debt she'd accumulated while trying to look the part. My parents tried to call, mostly to ask for money or to guilt-trip me into making things right with Chloe. I blocked their numbers. Last week, I stood on a stage at a national biotech conference. I was receiving the Innovator of the Year award for the very research Chloe tried to shove into her designer handbag. As I looked out into the crowd of scientists, investors, and peers, I didn't feel the bitterness I thought I would. I looked at the trophy in my hand. It was heavy, solid, and real. Revenge isn't always about a grand explosion or a public shaming. Sometimes it's just the quiet, surgical precision of letting the truth breathe. It's the anatomy of letting people face the consequences of their own choices. Chloe wanted the spotlight. She got it. It just happened to be the kind of light that reveals every crack in the foundation. As for me, I'm finally out of the basement, and the view from the top is exactly as clear as I imagined it would be.